we will stay together. To hear from the Metro Water Services. Mr. Scott Potter is with us. Mr. Potter, if you would introduce those with you. You're on for introductions.
Good evening, members of the council, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. Along with me tonight, I have Glenn Mizell to my right, and then Tony Newmeyer and Heidi Weigel to my left. They're members of our finance team. I'm going to start off with...
well, first, our threshold question. Can you operate within the mayor's proposed budget?
Yes, sir.
With that, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to start out with a summary of our financial position for fiscal year 2014. It's good news. On the water and sewer side...
Excuse me, Scott. Pull that just a tiny bit closer. There you go.
All right.
Thank you.
We're 2.7% ahead of revenue budget on water and sewer, and we are 9.3% below budget on expense. And on the stormwater side, we're presently about 4.8% below budget on revenue, but we're ahead of last year, so we'll make budget on revenue for stormwater, and we're presently significantly under budget on stormwater. That's just because we haven't allocated all the funds for C projects yet. We wait until June, and we use the balance of funds available to make sure we don't go over budget over the course of the year. Talk about some performance results for water and sewer. Happy to report that there's no chemicals in use at Whites Creek wastewater plant. We only use electricity to compress air, and we use ultraviolet light for disinfection. So that plant is chemical free. That's one of our long-term goals, is to try to transition as much as we can away from chemical use to other forms of disinfection. And we're on that process at the other plants as well. We had no instances where we were unable to meet water demand over the course of the fiscal year. We had notation order complaints on our drinking water. The water temperature this year is higher now than it was last year, so we're adding powered activated carbon earlier this year. That will result in a little bit more expense, but nothing we can't absorb. The laboratory passed all of our federal and state certifications, and happy to report that we've just completed our sanitary survey, which is a comprehensive evaluation of our drinking water operations that's conducted by TDEC, and we passed. We did not get 100, which is our goal, but TDEC, due to staffing constraints, changed their periodicity from 1 year to 2 years. So it's hard to be perfect for 2 years, but we're going to have, I think, about a 97 out of 100, so I'm pleased with that. And the cost of 1 gallon treated is still 0.0032 cents per gallon, and the cost of treating wastewater before it's reintroduced into the watershed is 0.0067 cents per gallon, which is, I think, 2 really good numbers. On the budget request for this fiscal year, we're requesting an increase of 2.6%, and that's $3 million. About $2.8 million of that is as a result of the salary increase and the associated benefit increases. So that's well within CPI. We do have an increase in fleet. We have 40 new vehicles, and that's going to cause us to move 2 positions from Met Water Services to fleet to help them maintain our share. That is reflected by a 2-person reduction in our budget, but they just transfer to fleet and we pay for them. I think that's responsible for us to do, and because we are adding to their cost of doing business. Our debt service goes up by $282,000, which is, I think, our debt service at this point is acceptable. When the budget process is over, I'm going to get with the finance director and see what we can do about our long-term approach to debt and see what we can do to stabilize our debt. We've got some continued high numbers that drop off dramatically in about 2018, 2019. So hopefully we'll be able to flatten that curve out a little bit and put ourselves in a better position. I do want to talk about one new program, the valve exercising program. We have about 70,000 valves in our system, and it's important for us to exercise them periodically because we need to be able to make sure that they work. The transmission mains are 24 inches and greater, distribution mains 20 inches and smaller. We want to exercise our transmission mains once every 3 years, and the distribution mains valves once every 7 years, and that will it will provide for identification of valves that are covered by pavement, for an example, valves that are mispositioned. From a water quality perspective, it's not good to have a valve that's closed that should be open, as an example, and that will it'll lower system pressure in certain areas. If you have closed valves, then you'll have the water moving in different directions, which will have localized high pressures, which will lead to higher main break probability. And then the electronic bill presentment and payment system, we this month went over the $300,000 a year savings threshold, which is good news. We're still going up. This month we went over 58,000 customers that have elected to receive an electronic bill. We're still advertising that because that saves us a lot of money, and it saves on wear and tear mailing a bill back and forth. Talk about stormwater a little bit. We pretty much completed the home buyout program associated with the flood. We have only one home left. We've done 224 homes, and we've transitioned them into green space, a park, and urban farms. And we did 200 Class C projects in stormwater, which is of big interest to the council. On the budget perspective for stormwater, our budget request is unchanged. The expense and the revenue for stormwater is highly predictable, so we feel really good about where our revenue is coming from and what it's going to be. And we also have a really good handle on how much money we can spend on projects. I feel really strongly about how well the stormwater funds are managed and how we prioritize the stormwater funds use. So that concludes our presentation. Good news is we're under budget on expense and over budget on revenue. Really can't ask for something better than that, and water quality continues to be good. So I'll entertain any questions that y'all have.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Stein. Question on Owendale. I think you're very familiar with that, and I'm going to ask a question relative to the budget. You said you're over budget on revenue and that you only have one home that remains in the buyout program. Because that particular stretch of Owendale that we're still having discussions about, which is the 400 block of Owendale that was affected by the May flood, the 2010 flood, was there any consideration into buying out any of those homes that were severely flooded within that stretch?
Well, it's important to note that we're over budget on water and sewer revenue. The stormwater revenue is coming in on budget, and we don't have the budget identified for the home buyout going forward that we did after the flood, because there was significant federal participation. So we returned to our previous approach of doing a lot less scope on home buyouts, and we also want to maintain our participation with the feds. Bad news is that federal funding is pretty much non-existent because of the prevalence in flooding nationwide. So for us to go in and buy out homes, it would be 100% funded by Metro, and that's not really the most efficient way to do it. So what we are continuing to do is identify a prioritized list of homes to buy out next, and once there are federal funds available, we'll go to the sharing approach again and go through another phase of home buyout.
Do we have in other areas of the county homes that have more than 3 inches of rain that creates a lake type situation outside of the ones that you did with the buyout?
Off the top of my head, Council Lady, I can't tell you exactly where that would occur. A 3-inch rain is pretty significant, and it's always dependent on the duration of that rain. But we do have areas in the county that perform poorly in heavy rain events, and those are the areas that we are trying to prioritize. Can
you consider that particular stretch for those couple of 2 or 3 houses along the 400 stretch of Owendale, should in the future we get any federal funding for home buyouts for homes that severely flood.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The other thing is, of course, you know that there is a meeting that I'm supposed to be scheduling in regards to the engineer's recommendations for the creek, Mill Creek, behind the homes on the 400 block of Owendale. What constituents have basically chewed me out about, that area is one of the most vocal areas within my district, is they feel like there is a failure to respond to the people's request in that area. And the letter that, was sent with myself and stormwater, they feel like that was an escape from doing anything to really remedy the issue. I have not scheduled that meeting because I think we need to get back at the table, because when you're talking about taking 75 feet of people's property, that gets people stirred up in a negative way. I didn't know when we had that meeting that it was 75 feet of everybody's property along that stretch of Owendale, which again emphasizes the severity of the issue along that area. We have got to, through some type of funding here, if funding is available, we've got to do something with that portion of Mill Creek along the 400 block of Owendale.
I understand, Council Lady. I'll get Ricky Swift and I will get with you, and we'll try to take a different approach.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilman Claiborne. Thank you, Mr. Potter. I have a question concerning the water sewer line protection program. This is the third letter that I've gotten since the first of the year regarding this. So this is with American Water Resources, and I understand, it's basically an insurance policy against land breakage or whatever. But what is the relationship that the department has with American Water Resources? How does this program work in terms of the water department and American Water Resources?
They responded most favorably to a bidding process, and we're awarded the contract. So we have fundamentally the relationship is they have access to our billing data, and we partnered with them to send each one of our customers the opportunity to voluntarily participate in that insurance program.
Okay, so Mr. Cooper, let me ask you a question since you're the only attorney in the room here. The only active attorney in the room. Okay, I'm sorry, active attorney. Is there, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disparage anyone. Is there any legal issues with a metro department providing addresses of citizens, property owners in the city?
All that information is public record, so unless it is exempt from disclosure by state law as being confidential, which to my knowledge names and addresses are not, then it could legally be disclosed.
Okay. And so what does the department get out of this?
We get a percentage of the revenue.
What's the percentage?
It's just to cover the administrative fee of billing.
I forgot the percent. I'll get you the number. It's to cover administrative costs.
I mean, is it like 50%?
Oh no, sir. It's a low
5%, or
I just forgotten the number. I'll get that to you.
So it's going up. I mean, it's you get an introductory enrollment here for until March the 15th, and then it goes up to what is it? $12.49 a month for.
Yes, sir. I want to point out it's completely voluntary. I mean,
right.
The customers, it's their exclusive choice.
Right. Well, I just the issue is that I've had several people to call me who have gotten this letter and said, "Why am I getting this from the water department? Why are they putting stuff in my mailbox asking me to buy insurance for my water and
Well,
sewer.
we're not asking people to do that, Councilman. And
Well-
we're providing a voluntary opportunity for someone to take an insurance policy out on their water and sewer lines. I think it's a pretty good thing, because a lot of folks have aging water and sewer service lines, and this provides people a level of comfort if they so choose.
Right.
It's a voluntary program.
I understand it's voluntary, but it kind of comes back to unsolicited material that I've had an issue with lately. Thank you.
And
Councilwoman Weiner.
Thank you, Chair. I feel like I'm finally face-to-face with my pen pal, Scott.
we talk a lot, I
We
guess, by
do.
email.
Unfortunately, Bellevue's had its share of stormwater issues, but I appreciate everything that y'all have done. Specifically, having had, I guess, the opportunity, if you will, to learn about the fog guidelines, I appreciate everything that y'all did to help me bring Harpeth Valley in line so that our businesses are all now dealing with criteria that are on a level playing
I
field.
appreciate you taking the leadership on that, Council Lady. I think it was a good thing.
Well, thank you. Ricky Swift, kudos times 10. The guy is a machine.
I agree.
I don't know how he does everything he does. And for our most recent, I think that we'll be able to get that last one
Yes, ma'am.
resolved. I have two quick questions. Share with us, for whoever's watching, because this is one of the most popular questions I get, what are the criteria that you base a decision on when you begin a stormwater project?
Well, we have a detailed sheet that we fill out that tries our best to score the severity of a problem. And at best, it's difficult to score on a 1 to 10 or a 1 to 100 the severity of a problem, because to that constituent, it's always a 100, and I understand that completely. But we've got so much demand on the stormwater fund availability that we have to come up with something that makes sense. So generally speaking, we break it down into personnel safety, always comes first, then property damage, and then infrastructure damage probability. So based on those three general categories, whichever one has the highest probability of danger is the projects we fund. We also, if we have a project in one neighborhood and we have 2 or 3 that are similar in nature in the same neighborhood, we'll try to group them together. So if we have a neighborhood problem, we'll try to do that one first. But at the end of the day, as you mentioned, Ricky is going to make a judgment call along with his staff about what he thinks is the best use of the funds at that time. Because one project may be an 85 or an 84, but who knows if it's an 81. Ricky, as an engineer and as an expert, is going to make a judgment call and assign the funds. I trust Ricky, I trust Casey, who works for Ricky, to make good judgments. They have. But the bad news is we have a lot of folks out there that have flooding concerns on their property that we can't address yet. With more funding, we could do more. I don't think we're the only department that would say that. But unfortunately, what gets the attention is what doesn't get done. But we have done and we continue to do a whole lot of really good projects. As I said in my introductory remarks, we did 200C projects. We could have done 201, I'm not sure. But with the funding we have available, I feel really good about what we've done.
How backed up are we?
Well, that's always a good question that comes up every year. We're never going to run out of stormwater work, and I would presume that every member of council would agree with that statement. I think we're making a dent on the really serious problems, but when it comes to maintenance, I think it's becoming like a brush pickup issue where the trees are always growing. We always get debris in the stormwater infrastructure. Each year it gets 1 year older. All the stuff that was put in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, especially the metal pipes, those are failing. They'll continue to fail. Yeah. It's just going to be something that we have to work on forever. The key thing for us to do is to prioritize it and to try to do what's the most important first and to seek additional funding sources. It's really that simple, but we're never going to run out of work.
So my second most popular question that I get is that $9 bill that I get every month.
Are you preempting Councilman Tiger's question?
Am I not? Really, Charlie? Wow. So, would you explain to the viewing audience where that money is used?
In the stormwater program. It's half of it generally goes to operation and maintenance, and half of it generally goes to capital. One of the things that's really interesting about working on stormwater is when the water falls out of the sky, the state government and the federal government gives us a permit to discharge that rainwater into what's called waters of the state. And if we're out of compliance with our permit, we'll get fined. And then we'll get ordered through the courts to come into compliance with our permit. That would be pretty silly to come out of compliance with our permit, because it'd be, we just send money to DC. So a lot of the money, not a lot of money, a portion of the money goes to permit compliance. Some of the money goes to plans review, O&M, capital, salaries. But comprehensively, it's to operate and maintain the nation's third largest stormwater system. People are shocked to hear that, but we have a very, very extensive system. And I always tell people when I go to public meetings is when you're driving home and you're not driving, look out the window and observe all the curb and gutter, all the storm inlets, all the creeks, all the bridges, the abutments, all the stuff that people don't notice when it's not raining. Like today, the stormwater system is working great. It costs a lot of money to maintain. And I think since 2002, we've done a really good job of shaving the peak of the demand on the stormwater system on a maintenance side, but it's just something that we have to keep working at. And I understand that people don't want to give the government more money, but I think we've demonstrated proper stewardship of it, and I think we're making a pretty good dent in the backlog. And we've also established ourselves as a national leader on water quality. So it's a really strange thing to be permitted to discharge rainwater into the waters of the state. But over the course of 10, 15, 50 years, we're showing quantifiable improvements in water quality in the Tribs and in the Cumberland. So I think it's successful.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilman Taggart.
Can I just go ahead and answer it?
Fire away.
This goes out July 1st. All of the changes to the billing system computer program were complete in April.
Okay.
So in July, it may not be a purple sheet of paper like I agreed.
So my negative balance won't be addressed in that, though. I thought we had already addressed that.
Well, you'll have to opt in, because we're going to send we're going to put the flyer in the bill. Okay. And then we're asking y'all to call and say, I don't want to receive a bill, because a lot of folks want to receive their bill. You won't get a bill going forward.
So I assume most council members and our viewing public, this has to do with the postage and stuffing and mailing and the trying to cost that I choose to pay 4 quarters at once, so I don't have to write 4 $9 checks, or on this particular account, it's 4 $80 checks.
You're a special customer, Councilman. We try to teach.
So, yeah, thank you. All right, a couple of quick questions. No changes to the sprinkler adjustment this year?
No, sir.
All right, so citizens who water their garden and plants will see that average bill, and they won't pay the sewer portion on it, so that's a good thing for our constituents.
I agree.
All right. Let's go into a little bit more depth with you and Rich. Your conversation you're going to have about your debt service problem or issue right now, and what the solution is and what you're trying to accomplish.
Well, I don't want to label it as a problem, because as a utility, we're in good shape, especially when you compare us to our peers. We have responsible levels of debt. One of the things I approached the finance director about was we have a steep curve that drops off in about 2018, 2019.
And that's based on a lot of bonds 18 years ago or something?
Yes, sir. Bonds are coming due, and they're, I don't know what the word is, but we're paying them off. So the curve drops off dramatically. What that does on the short term is it, in my opinion, and I'm not a bond expert, so I'm kind of speaking off the cuff here, I think we could hopefully flatten the curve out, make it flat, and keep the same area under the curve, but reduce the demand on debt service. Is that a good summary?
Rich, so how do we accomplish that? Or
it's a great concept, but it's a little complicated to achieve because of federal tax laws and things of that nature, and an additional cost. I mean, what Scott would like to do is basically level his debt service off on an ongoing basis, and so essentially you would push some of today's debt out a little bit. So there's a cost. So there's a negative associated with that. So I don't know if it's good from a management perspective. So he has level debt service and he can sort of plan.
Frees up money in this year's budget.
And can sort of plan for the future a little bit better in terms of where he's going to go. But there's going to be a cost associated with that because you're extending the life of that debt for a period of time. And so that's something that we're going to sit around and talk about and see if we think that's a good idea or a bad idea. I'm not ready to say it's a good idea or a bad idea, but it is. I mean, we did it before on the bonds for the general obligation. Right. There's a specific reason why we did it, and it was because of the fiscal time we were in, and we needed relief in the operating budget, and so we did it. And I stand by it. I think it was we can argue the cost of it and all that till freezes over, but I think it was the right thing to do at the time, looking back at where we were. And so I think that's a similar discussion that we're going to have in a couple weeks, maybe next week after, can't remember what it is, about that, but the goal being, the water department, water and sewer are going to have to incur a lot of debt over the next decade. It's going to happen, and we want to plan for it so that we can do the needs of the department, serve the public, provide them the quality water and sewer, and do it at the lowest cost possible, because none of us want to vote on rate increases unless we have to. We may have to at some point in time, but the goal is to try to get ahead of the curve so we know when that is and can plan for it, and they're reasonable increases and not get to sort of a crisis stage like we were 5 or 6 years ago, and Scott knows better than I, when he had no debt, no bonding capacity, he had no ability to do capital improvements, and because nobody wanted to face the fact that we had to raise rates. Well, we proposed it, the council stood up and voted for it, and we all took the lumps, whatever you want to call it, did it. So that's what we want to talk about doing, but it's and we want to come up with a long-term plan, which obviously we'll share with the council once we kind of get it all finalized.
Sure. Okay. Is there money in this year's budget for fire suppression, i.e. extend our fire hydrants to underserved areas that would impact insurance rates and the ability to get water to certain areas of town? I mean, Councilman Stanley comes to mind. He's been harping on that issue, but I think he's actually right on it, that if we have underserved areas, it's our responsibility as a community to make sure we start addressing these with some type of long-term plan to provide this service.
We have what we call the Water Main Infrastructure Renewal Program, and also we do have a capital line item for fire hydrant replacement. The issue that always comes to the forefront on that is water quality. And if you go out into the further reaches of the county, if you have large water mains, we're required to have a 6-inch main to attach a fire hydrant to. If you start arbitrarily increasing the size of water mains, you're going to decrease water quality, and you're going to increase the necessity for additional infrastructure like pump stations. So there's always a balance between just attaching fire hydrants or building new infrastructure. The balance is water quality, and it's also additional expense. If I could just have infrastructure follow the sky such that we had 6-inch water mains all over the county wherever we wanted them, we would have dramatic, and I don't use that word loosely, additional demands on pump stations to maintain pressure. And we'd also have, I guarantee we'd have a lot of folks calling y'all saying, why on earth are y'all putting water into the ditch? Because what we'd have to do is install what we call blow-offs that would run continuously to maintain water quality in those mains, because there wouldn't be water turnover. The objective on water is completely opposite of wine. If it's old, it's bad. So we want to have the water used quickly and turn over quickly. So we're always looking to put fire hydrants in them. Huge
But do we have a plan? I mean, can you provide us with here are parts of town that we have identified, and this is the plan, this is the cost, this is the projection of what year it could accomplish?
Well, what you're asking, from our perspective, that's the Water Main Infrastructure Renewal Program, and
Okay.
we do have that, and we can brief you on that.
Okay, so Councilman Stanley, when he asks his questions, there's an answer that it'll be 4 years, 8 years, 28 years, some answer, because I think that Council Lady Weiner hit upon it a little bit. Part of the frustration of the people paying that $9 fee, hey, I may not be next in line, but just give me some kind of idea. Am I 5 years out, 55 years out? And that's what we
understand.
struggle to tell them, I guess.
Yes, sir. I understand.
All right, so if you could provide us that information, would be great, and get it to Ms. Waller, please. Stormwater funding, you said if you had more, you could do more projects and whatnot.
Yes, sir.
Other than the stormwater fee, are there any other dedicated sources of stormwater funding? Could this insurance rebate that's coming to you from what Councilman Claiborne talked about, could that be dedicated to, should this body and you, could that be dedicated to stormwater as opposed to general water funds?
The short answer is no, because it's water sewer revenue.
Okay. So other than stormwater fees, are there any other
No, sir.
avenues that no other community has that we can copy or propose or discuss?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, the federal funding isn't there anymore, and it's water, it's going to be a stormwater fees is our revenue stream.
But you could increase the amount
Other
of the
than
fee.
increasing the fee?
Yes, sir.
That's basically the alternative. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilwoman Allen.
Thank you. Just to pick up on that stormwater fee, in addition to increasing it, are there other ways that it could be structured that might
There are
add to that?
multitudes of ways to structure the stormwater fee.
And what would it take to get that discussion going, or do we
Action
not
by
want
the
to go?
council. I mean, there's a multitude of ways of doing it, and I'm happy to talk to you about your ideas, talk about what we've talked about in the past.
Right.
But it's just one of those things that you got to pick a way to do it, and
Go with it.
if you change it, then it takes action by the council.
Right, but perhaps if we let people know, more stormwater projects could get fixed if we were willing to look at that.
We're all about more revenue.
Right, okay, good to know. Second question was, in terms of the Class C projects versus just the quick fix, clean out how do you prioritize between those, or?
We have crews that work out of the County Hospital Road location that whatever they can do, we'll do first, because they have the equipment that they can do ditch maintenance and that kind of stuff. When it transitions, generally speaking, to having to get out of the right-of-way, that's when we go to a C project, because we have enough to do with our crews in the right-of-way that it doesn't make sense to get them in off the right-of-way.
Right.
So
Okay.
that's kind of the threshold. If it's off the street, out of the right-of-way, it'll transition to KC.
Gotcha. Okay, and then final question. I know every time, or most times when a sidewalk is installed in a new place, that involves new stormwater infrastructure. And so rainwater that used to be just floating into somebody's yard and disappearing into the grass is now becoming part of your system. Do we have the long-range plan to deal with that increase, or are there other cities that have figured out how to invent sidewalks that don't require that? Is there some way to still filter it back into the yards?
We work really closely with Mark on the sidewalk master plan, and whenever he does a sidewalk project, they talk to us, and whenever we do a project that involves new stormwater infrastructure, we talk to them. So it's on a project-by-project basis. We're closely coordinated with them.
Yeah.
It works very well.
I'm seeing that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. Members of the committee, members of the council, remind you all at our council meeting next Tuesday night will be public hearing on second reading on the mayor's proposed budget to us, and then we will reconvene here at 4 o'clock next Wednesday. Thank you all very much.